What's the craziest thing an ex-friend slash lover has done to you? She made a key to my house and stole my dog after we broke up. She then called me and told me she found said dog running loose in my neighborhood. Neighbor had it all on video. Dog was very confused. She called my boss, told them I was embezzling. Took 3 audits to clear me. Helped me pack. Knew I was putting things into storage. Put raw chicken into a Rubbermaid with appliances they knew I wouldn't open for months. My friend's girlfriend called the police and told them that he had told her that he kept hearing voices telling him to kill her, which was a complete fabrication. The cops came and put him in a psychiatric ward for 3 days of observations until the doctors finally believed he was sane. She did it during final exam week when he was in college. She was straight evil. Woke up from a heavy night of drinking next to my ex. She asked if I wanted to try to put a baby in her, and when I said no, she pulled a knife on me asking if I wanted to die. Flew in from overseas to support me when my father unexpectedly died, and then proceeded to break up with me on the day of the funeral. Messaged my relatives on social media convincing them I was trying to commit suicide. She fabricated screenshots of a conversation and everything. I'm just lucky my parents understand me enough to know that if I was going to do that I wouldn't tell a girl I was with for a few months. I got arrested and spent around 32 hours in jail because he pulled a prank on me. He was the designated driver. We went to a party and I drank more than I should have. He dropped me off just over a block from my house. When I got out of the back of the car I didn't recognize anything. I reached for my phone, but realized that I didn't have it. I walked the block looking for a street I knew, but couldn't find one. I then picked a direction to walk in to search for a major street. Apparently he had thought it'd be funny to drop me off in the wrong neighborhood instead of at my house, and lifted my cell phone off me, so I couldn't call for help. Supposedly his plan was to let me wander around lost for like 10 minutes and then find me to actually take me home. He never found me. After a few hours of walking around lost I had sobered up and was thirsty. I had found a larger street, but it was like 2 AM at that point and everything was deserted, so I couldn't ask anyone for help. Eventually I saw a police car patrolling and flagged them down for help. They told me that I was over 10 miles from my house and that I was in a very unsafe neighborhood. They didn't believe my story. After some discussion they offered to give me a ride home, but asked me to put my hands behind my back while they searched me for weapons. I complied and they immediately cuffed me and told me that they were arresting me for public intoxication. I didn't have money at the time, so I didn't want to call anyone to post bail for me. Also I kept getting told that they'd release me as soon as I was processed because I was already sober. There were no windows in the holding cell, no clock, and they never dimmed the light, so I and the others had no concept of time. I was fed twice and had access to water and a toilet. I managed to fall asleep a few times, but I kept waking up shivering. When I was finally released it was 9 AM a whole day after I'd been arrested. My roommate had reported me missing and had been informed that I'd been arrested. I was able to call my roommate from a payphone and get him to pick me up. A few weeks later I found out that the charge of public intoxication had been dropped. So thankfully I didn't have to pay a fine or take DUI classes. I have no idea what the hell is wrong with my friend who pranked me. He did apologize and felt bad, but I stopped hanging out with him after that. Showed up to my parents' house while I was with my new girlfriend and told my parents how we couldn't break up because I had sex with her and so we had to be life partners. Parents were ultra conservative, so it was a fun time. My ex donated a kidney to me. It still wows me how she decided without even a moment of hesitation. Great person for sure. My husband. We were high school sweethearts. After 4 kids and 16 years of marriage he cheated on me, but he didn't tell me for over a year. On the day he chose to tell me about his affair, I was in the middle of chemo for breast cancer. I was bald, sick and had only one breast. My mom had passed away 10 days earlier, and it was my birthday. Good times. This was 12 years ago. Happily I'm healthy. My kids are thriving, and we are divorced. But yeah, never saw that one coming. I learned the whole cheating lesson from an ex. And honestly, the worst part about it wasn't even the act itself. It was the fact that to this day she legitimately doesn't believe she did anything wrong. After all, she still loves me. It's just sex with everyone else. So, therefore, I'm the asshole for dumping her. Counting the years till my son turns 18, and I can just block her number for good. This thread makes me feel better about being single. Came over to my house and punched me awake because I didn't answer her phone call because I was sleeping. Oh, and she stabbed me with a pencil. One time my GF at the time was staying over. I'd been at work late the night before, so I wanted to sleep in. She tried to wake me. It didn't work, so I fell back to sleep. So after an unknown amount of time, I was in deep sleep. She apparently lost patience. She put her mouth directly against my ear and screamed as loud as she could. A high-pitched horror movie scream. The pain was immediate. It's been about 15 years and my left ear, if I'm in a loud place, buzzes like I've got a wasp in my ear. It sounds exactly like a blown out speaker. This was just one of the things she did. When I broke up with her, she told all her friends I beat her up, and they still believe her. My ex came to my apartment while my now husband was there, rang the doorbell, and admitted that he'd been watching us through the glass in the front door. Luckily we weren't fooling around just watching a movie. Proceeded to threaten to kill my husband after the inevitable confrontation. Then proceeded to try and get hired at my husband and I, place of work, and got so far as the interview, before I found out and called HR to let them know he would be a threat to us. A couple of weeks later my mail goes missing, and turns out he'd taken it, and proceeded to pay my electric bill. Glad that's behind me. I was in the military at the time. Ex called the base, and told them I was passing her secrets. Also called my mom, and told her I died. But the army wouldn't tell her, and called my landlord to tell them I was killed, so they should release the apartment. Yay. That ended up being hell for me. The military takes that shit very seriously. I was pulled out of formation and arrested. No idea what is going on. Took 2 weeks before they believed me and released me back to my unit. By then the landlord had actually started boxing up all my stuff to sell off. I still think about the karma she has coming to her at some point. And we had only dated for maybe 3 months. WTF. She was crazy. Cheated on me and sent me videotapes of it, greeting me in them and telling me I'd never be enough while still blackmailing me so I wouldn't leave. Edit. It was a male ex, not a she. I don't know why anyone would assume that, lol. My ex planted a dog camera facing my bed before leaving. Took me a week to realize she had put it there. She also rented the flat directly beside me and would monitor who was coming in and out of my flat and text them to see if we were doing anything. Fun times. Edit. The dog camera was one of those ones you can log onto your phone, check up on the dog, and speak to it, dispense treats, etc. She had bought it as a Christmas present the year before. We unplugged and left it in a drawer because we thought it would be creepier if it got hacked and someone was watching us. Joke's on me, I guess. At the time of breaking up I generally had a lot of my mates around, so they were the ones who were being messaged by her. They would also say walking up to the flat that they could see her perched on her windowsill seeing who was approaching. Came downstairs. He was cleaning his gun. Had him name bullets for me. She tried to do a 3-way with me and her friend once she found out I had a new girlfriend. In order to break us up, I declined. Then she got her friend, yes the same one, to hook up with my buddy, who then convinced him to invite her to a party at his house I went into the bathroom, and when I opened the door she was standing there. freaked me the fuck out. I said hi. Excuse me. I'm about to leave this house when she pushed me as hard as she could back into the bathroom and came in and locked the door. At this point I freaked out and just started yelling for help. My buddy and a few others came and unlocked the door and pulled her out, and I was able to get out of the bathroom. I started walking upstairs to head to the door and get in my truck to leave when she flies out the door and runs to my truck. She stands there while I'm standing there in disbelief. At this point we had been broken up for months. I walk back inside and one of her friends approached me and told me if I told her, the friend, that I never wanted to see or talk to my ex again she would let me leave. I complied and told her friend that it was over and I never wanted anything to do with my ex again. I waited a few and peeked outside and saw the coast was clear and started heading to my truck. I hear a scream and look over and my ex is running full speed at me screaming. Out of nowhere another lady does a full on tackle of my ex and says get the fuck out of here. As I drive away I get a call from the party saying she locked herself in the bathroom with a knife threatening to off herself. I called her parents and kept driving. This all happened after she did the following. 1. Called me hundreds of times from a dozen numbers to which I blocked and requested she doesn't call. 2. Egged new girlfriend's car. 3. Tried to get me to do threesome. 4. Tried to make me fuck buddies. 5. Asked a very desperate friend of mine to prom hoping to get in our group. 6. Followed me to work. Home. 2 years later. I have a new phone number and I'm in college. I get a call and answer it. It's her. No idea how she found me. She asked if I went to the local university to which I replied yes. I did not actually go there. I went to a state college. She enrolled in that university. That's the end of that story. She literally stole my bed. An ex poisoned my dog. Tried to tell me she was pregnant when I broke up with her for being a compulsive liar, which just confirmed that she was indeed a compulsive liar. Claimed she had cancer, so I rearranged my job to move 300 kilometers to help her out and look after my daughter. Then she stabbed herself in the stomach to make it look like she'd had a biopsy when I dropped her off to the hospital. The DV accusation was also fun. Fortunately by that point she had acted so crazy around everyone that her friends, the child services worker who was investigating her, and the cops were all like, lol, sure he did, and left it at that. The only pity is that for my daughter I'll never be around her mother again without witnesses. I'm not risking a false accusation like that again. Edit. I forgot the best part. She'd been lying to her family about the cancer as well, so at some point that day I realized that her mother was expecting her to have gone in for a biopsy at 11 AM. And that it was now 6 PM and she hadn't been called. I had to call my ex's mother and tell her daughter was nuttier than squirrel poo laced with shrooms and that the cancer was a lie. Also because this was COVID travel restriction time she couldn't travel to visit her. My own mother handled it like a champ and told me that traveling to help me out for a little while was far too much to ask and that she was ashamed that I'd asked her for help as she'd never asked anyone for anything. Needless to say we don't talk anymore and damp, I haven't trusted another woman since. My daughter accepted of course. Got mail delivered to my house when she found out I was going to break up with her. Then wouldn't leave when I did break up with her. I called the police and since she received mail at my house they said it was officially her residence as well. I had to call my landlord and have him evict me to get her to leave. Once she left he rescinded the eviction notice and I moved back in. My emotionally abusive ex and I found each other on a dating site about 5 to 6 years after our relationship fell apart. I had made the mistake of reaching out to her, believing she'd grown as a person and maybe we could get some closure. Her exact words, had her gonna die alone. She attacked me with a ukulele while screaming. We had been arguing heatedly and she went to another room. I assumed she was just getting some space and cooling off. A moment later she came running out of the room, screaming and swinging a little guitar at me. We didn't break up then, but eventually did, and that incident was the main reason. However, Until then I could never be calm if she was in another room. She would punch me in the stomach in the spot that makes you lose your breath almost every day because she thought it was funny. When I had one lung for a hole between waiting for a donor, I had an ex-friend stab me in the chest where I didn't have a lung because he thought it wouldn't hurt because I didn't have a lung. Told me he had just tried to secure a gun so he could kill everyone I cared about. Ex-friend of about 6 months in my case. First off, he decided to not be friends with me after an argument over kickball. We were on the same team. Now he won't so much as make eye contact with me. We even still play sports against each other sometimes, and him trying to get me out in dodgeball was the only time he'd even look in my direction. We still have a lot of mutual friends, and we were even at a mutual friend's house yesterday and he wouldn't acknowledge me. The crazy part, we are 30 adult men and I feel like I'm dealing with a child. I'm not the lover/partner in this scenario, but basically my dad was upset with my mom for negligent behavior towards my younger siblings. So he started referring to them as our kids when talking to me because I was the one taking care of them. He also said, "Here's your child support payment," when he gave me money to buy food for them. My mom is the abusive one, but the way he handled it was pretty yikes. Don't drag me into it, man. Took pics of me and my phone number and created a Grindr account. I got so many dick pics. Was pretty funny though. I don't know how fucked this is compared to most, but the ex said she was going with her kids. We didn't live together, obviously, to stay at a resort, live in LV, when in fact she was staying at NaN Casino with a truck driver. Said driver got extremely drunk and belligerent the next morning/afternoon, and she clearly must have too, because she ended up passing out in his truck cab that evening as he in a rage withheld her phone from her. He evidently discovered the phone video of me and her doing the deed and proceeded to post it on her FB page. I started to get texts/calls around 7 PM from friends, then her close friends. Was insanely embarrassing and heartbreaking at the same time. I was in a bar within the hour trying to calm down, since said video was not, because of the angle, breaking any FB decency rules and her being passed out. It took until 10 to 11 AM the next day before it was removed. By that time her ex-husband, bizarre, already had a missing persons report with the police. Everyone from her hometown was bugging him and me. Most thought I posted it at first as to where TF she was. Cops had to come to me at the casino I work at and ask me if I wanted to press charges. Of course I didn't. What a clusterfuck. Got into a fight at the strip club that I didn't agree to go to. Took my keys, threw it away, then drove off with my phone. I was far away from home. 2 AM. Walking alone. With a bunch of bruises. Thank God. I find a way out of that toxic bullshit. She left for another man. Marry him. Within a year she wanted to have sex with me. Not exactly crazy, but we were kids. My ex-best friend bullied me for over 5 years in primary school. It was like a masterclass in abusive friendships. You're not allowed to talk to them, or I'll stop being your friend, because no one else will tolerate you, sort of thing. And it was coming from a 7-year-old girl. She used to hit me a lot and was the reason I had believed I was fat, even though I was a really tiny wee girl. The biggest thing though was when it was our big theater production at the end of school. The entire school was watching, and also our parents. I went on stage and she tripped me up as I went up the stairs, leading to me smacking onto the set and knocking a bunch of stuff over. One of the most embarrassing moments of my life, and I was only 10. Poke holes in my condoms. My mom let my best friend and her mom stay with us because they got kicked out of their house. Was only supposed to be a temporary thing. A few months later my brother had some serious medical issues come up and had to move home. I moved into the garage so he could have my room. Also side note, but her mom was a hoarder and forks and spoons were going missing, being left in her room with moldy food. After a month my brother was still not doing well, and having other people in the house was stressing him out and making his condition worse. So we told them they had to move out within 2 months. My mom told her mom that my brother was becoming suicidal because of the pain and wanted to shoot himself. The day that they were supposed to move out they replaced the lock on the bedroom door and said we didn't give them proper notice, even though we did. Later that night her mom called the police and said my brother had a gun and threatened to shoot them. We don't have any guns and the only person he threatened to shoot was himself because of the physical pain he was in. He only told this to my mom, who told my friend's mom to make her understand how severe his medical condition was getting. They moved out a month later, and I have not talked to my ex-best friend since. Smashing a salt lamp across my shin. Shoving me downstairs. Kicking me full force in the jaw causing it to pop ever since. Cheating. Lying. Using me for a few grand under false pretenses. Leaving me stuck with nowhere to go, and stuck out in freezing raining for 8 hours. Gave my sweet loving dog who never knew a bit of meanness in her life to someone who starved, beat, abused then eventually shot and killed her. That's just some of the highlights. Cheated on me, then cheated on me again, after we went to months of therapy. Then emailed my parents and told them I was bad at sex. My ex had BPD and complex PTSD. She wrote a blog about me where everything from the way I walked down the road to the way I paid for things was abusive. She sent this out to all of our mutual friends and acquaintances. To top it all off she falsely accused me of raping her in the blog. Like Gordon. Man. I was too terrified of this person to not ask for explicit consent. Eventually she got her anarchist friends to egg my house and, I think, break into my house and steal a bunch of things. Got a tattoo of me on his back. Dumped me 2 weeks later. Wanted to get back together 2 months later. When I refused he slit his wrists in my driveway. Tried to suffocate me. I had fallen asleep on his pull-out couch at his apartment while he went out with friends. I wake up at 1 AM and start to pack up my stuff to go home because I had work in the morning. Just as I'm leaving he comes in and says, "Baby, you're still here?" I reply, "Baby, where were you?" in a nice sweet tone. He then starts yelling / calling me every name on the book. I start hysterically crying and he tells me to shut up, but I can't, I just keep crying. So he pushes me on the pull-out and puts one hand around my neck and pillow on my face and I can't breathe. Some voice in my head told me to stay calm, so instead of struggling I just lay there calmly, and after maybe 30 seconds he picks up the pillow and I got the fuck out of there. I sometimes wonder if I would have fought back, would he have held me down longer and killed me? Mine tried to hit me with his car because I stopped him from unaliving himself. Ex-best friend. Secretly very jealous of everything in my life. Women. Friends. etc. Secretly gathered information over years of time and used it to attempt to ruin every relationship with a woman I had, and trying to get with them, still wondering if he was secretly in love with me. Sent me $1 on Venmo just to say one last fuck you. Had a teacher in HS that I got close to in grades 10 to 12. I'd call him a friend when I didn't want to take any of the available classes. He got the principal to approve a class, Sociology 3, in case you're curious, where it would be just me in the class, and he taught it. I didn't have to do shit, but hang out with him for an entire period, and got an A. Solid deal. Well, I graduated at semester, and he bought me a grad card. He'd filled every single blank space with tiny writing about how much he loved me, and couldn't he just keep me? If he couldn't, he was feeling like he would kill himself. As I type this now, I'm getting creeped out, but at 17 I was too naive to see that for what it was. And I'm only giving you about half the story here. Anyway, that's my crazy friend story. Last I heard he quit his job of 20 plus years after I graduated and moved to IDK. What happened to him from there? Edit. Okay. I'm getting some messages about elaborating on this. To be clear, I don't have any trauma associated with the situation. The relationship started when I was 15. I went to a tiny rural school and even then I stood out in a crowd. Not a brag. It's relevant to understanding how this all came about. The teacher was in his late 40s, never married, and as I learned later, never even had a girlfriend. Very quiet type. I was going through some things at home, and I needed a trusted adult. I was drawn to him, and confided several things to him. And he was a true friend when I needed one. You can simultaneously be very beautiful and very lonely. As I learned early in life, I took to spending a lot of time in his room. Just talking. Playing on the chalkboard. Nothing more. The next year our talks turned to boys. And he tried to give me some advice about not falling for the BS that high school boys do to get in your pants. He was very critical of boys I dated. Always pointing out flaws and such. I started driving that year and that put him on edge because he didn't always know the boys I went out with personally. He was constantly asking if I was okay. Was I comfortable doing what boys and girls that age do? It seemed like he was looking out for me, protecting me, and I believe he was. I visited him at his house, but he didn't make advances or anything. He did call me in the evenings and weekends quite a bit. He had a stuffed bear I'd given him which he named after me. Usually he'd call to say he and bear missed me. My senior year was when we had the one-on-one class, but again it was just talking, although by that point we were so close people noticed it. I think I knew he was in love with me, but he never touched me except for a hug here and there and never asked for anything that would make me uncomfortable. Other than the card, he never did anything odd. We confided a lot in each other, and we were two people who needed one another at the time. If I had to do it again I'd make the same choices. I remember when I read the card being deeply sad and sorry for him, that I couldn't return the kind of love he had. For me he was a dear friend and nothing more. I remember him fondly and hope he's well, wherever he is. Told some crazy and untrue stories. I call them untrue stories rather than lies as there was some truth in them. It puts you in a position of having to explain things that are no one's business, and the complicated explanation makes it sound like you're lying anyway. Cheated on me while our daughter was 6 months old. Lied right to my face about it. I had to find out for myself through our security cameras. Today, nearly 3 years later, and 2 days after X has had second child with man she cheated on me with, I learned that I have PTSD. I still keep in contact with X because we share custody. Social worker gave me courage to open a message from her that was simply a picture of my daughter holding her new baby sister. I broke down in tears. I got therapy set up at the end of the month. This girlfriend, on and off for over 5 years, told me she only dates guys 6 feet 2 inches and above. I told her my height was 5 minutes and 10 seconds. She didn't believe me and told me I was at least 6 feet. I showed her my driver's license. Literally the next day she calls me up and says it's not going to work. Keep in mind we had been dating on and off for over 5 years by this point, lol. Lol. Used to run a small DIY punk venue. My ex, who was angry with me at the time, came to a huge Halloween show we put on. Went into the bathroom, lit the trash can on fire, locked the door behind her and left. I busted the door open and extinguished the fire before the building caught. I had approximate 250 kids in the venue that night. SMH. Watched as their friend did shit to me while I was sleeping. My ex-fiancé married my sister. Attempted to catfish me on Black Planet using a picture she manually snapped from a magazine as her profile picture. I could see the seam down the center of the picture. I knew it was her because she had a very poor grasp of grammar and she makes specific mistakes that no one makes. When we met on the site, before I realized who she was, I asked why she was single. She stated that her ex died 2 years ago. Considering she pulled a gun on me in a prior instance, that may well have ended up being true. Edit, I misspelled grammar. We'd been broken up for about 10 months and hadn't spoken in 7. For completely unrelated reasons after our breakup, I'd moved across the country, as in, I had been living on the East Coast and moved to California. She had found out where I lived, flown out there, rented a car, and was parked on my block scouting out my house. In the car was a pair of binoculars, a book on bad witching, to explain to any passersby why she was staring around a neighborhood with binoculars, and a cat carrier. She didn't have a cat. I did. She was planning to break into my house and steal my cat. She had even bought a return flight ticket back to the East Coast with the pet fee paid. Left me homeless. We had decided to move in together, so I gave my notice to my landlord. This was a college town, so my landlord called the next person on the waiting list, and they signed a lease that day. My BF, my ex now, was living in a rented room and hadn't yet given his landlord his notice. When I saw him that night, he said he would have to call his landlord in the morning because he had to give notice and it was the last day he could and not pay rent for the next month. We needed his portion of rent, with mine to afford the new apartment. We got into an argument that night and I decided to go home to cool off that night. The next day he was unreachable. It didn't bother me too much. I had a full day that day and called him the next day where he sounded fine. Then he waited almost a week. Then offhandedly mentioned that he didn't call the landlord, so he couldn't move in with me. He knew I didn't have the $ to move into the new apartment now. I asked him why he didn't call and give notice that day, and he said, because you didn't seem too worried about it when you argued with me that night. I broke up with him right then and there. And here's the funniest part. He was shocked. 2 weeks later I was living on the other side of the state and ignoring his letters. Died. Still not forgiven her for it tbh. Bought a ton of pizza under my name and got them delivered to my work. Secretly dropped off an envelope of porn magazines to the same job by leaving them by the work door, making it look like I ordered them. Also sent porn mags in an envelope to apartment property manager addressed to me and postcards with strange messages. No concrete proof it was her, but I know it was her. Ex-best friend would beg me to get on so I could listen to her troubles. I tried sharing my troubles once, and she gave literally the worst advice. And I told her I couldn't do that. She said, well, I can't help you if you won't help yourself, and unfriended and blocked me. We had been friends for 12 years. I told her I was super anxious about midterms and was fighting with my folks. She told me to quit halfway through senior year of college and to move out of my parents' house, which I couldn't afford at the time. I just needed a drink, some chamomile tea, and maybe we can talk about how you can solve this. Ex called me 1 week later after breaking up with me asking what I was doing for the night. I had plans to go to Friday night MTG with a friend. She proceeded to call me every 10 minutes. She said she was going to kill herself and banged her head against the wall until she knocked herself out. I had to quit the tournament and have my friend drive me home so I could talk with her on the phone all night. I saw her the next day because she said she wanted to be sure we should have broken up. She broke up with me again because she didn't feel anything anymore. I was an emotional wreck and she made it a roller coaster of a relationship. She then ghosted me even though she said she wanted to be friends. I never got closure and it fucked me up for a few years. Bitch was crazy. Sprayed perfume in her mouth before kissing me because she thought it would make her mouth taste good. Judging by some of the comments in here, I've been really lucky considering this is the weirdest thing that comes to mind. Told me she could make up anything she wanted to have me arrested because who would believe me over her, or kill me if she felt like it. She's a cop and we lived in her jurisdiction. She was real peach. Got me high the day I left rehab. Also he tried to kill me, but I don't remember it. Huh. She bought her own engagement ring with me there, telling her not to buy it. I broke up with her as we left the store. She pleaded with me to stay and I caved. A few months later she started getting resentful that I hadn't proposed and demanded that I take over the ring payments she'd been making. Noped out. Burned my passport, social security card, birth certificate, and driver's license. Oh, and she kidnapped my child. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.